Hey there everybody, Sage Popham here, founder of the School of Evolutionary Herbalism, and in this week's issue of the blog, I want to be talking about one of the best ways that you can approach studying herbal medicines. You know, I think it's really easy for us as herbalists when we're considering how we approach learning about medicinal plants that we think about, reading books and going to workshops and classes and conferences and really focusing on studying them more from that intellectual approach. And I think that's really important. Obviously, if we're going to be an effective herbalist, we got to have our know-how, right? We got to really dig into our studies and into our research and really focus on learning them in that way. But to me, what makes a really effective herbalist isn't just having intellectual knowledge about the plants, but rather we want to have that be balanced through an experiential understanding of the herbs, right? And I think it's really important that when we're focused on progressing on our plant path and that we're, aiming towards moving to kind of that next level, that next stage in our development as an herbalist, that we do our best to maintain this balance between intellectual knowledge and experiential understanding. And, I always like to say that I think it's really interesting that in, our Western culture, we have this phrase of knowing something by heart. And I always think about that, like, what does it mean to really know something by heart? And how is that different from memorizing a bunch of stuff, right? I think about our educational system and how oftentimes in the Western world, the whole way our educational model is done is that we have to memorize, right? We got to memorize all the information so we can get the good grade on the test. And who likes memorizing, It's like when it comes to studying about plants, maybe you're studying about a certain herbal action and maybe you're reading about diuretics, right? And then here's this huge list of all the herbs that are diuretics. And, it's one thing to have to memorize all of those herbs that are diuretic in our heads, but it's a whole other thing when you actually experience a diuretic herb in your own body, right? That there's a process of integration of information when we actually directly experience for ourselves the medicinal properties of the plants that we know and love. And so how do we experience herbs, right? How do we move out of intellectual studies and into experiential studies? Well, I think there's a number of ways we can go about doing that. One, of course, is growing the herbs for yourself, right? If maybe you've got a garden or a front yard or a backyard or a little place where you can put some seeds in the ground, or even you have pots in your apartment or something like that where you can grow the herbs for yourself. That is just an incredibly powerful way for seeing the herb and smelling the herb and seeing the plants through their life cycle as they go through the seasons. What an incredible way to directly experience your remedies. Another way is just that I think is really the most important way of experiencing plants, and that is through tasting. In our, when we think of, not too many people really think of taste, right? We think of, taste being mostly associated with food, right? And it's either like, well, it either tastes good or it doesn't taste good. But from the orientation of an herbalist, taste is one of the most powerful tools that you have in terms of having a sensory experience of a plant that can give you actually a whole lot of information about that herb. One of the things about the taste is that it gives you a glimpse into the medicinal properties of a plant. There's a pattern there. Anyone that's ever gone deep into this, it's just interesting to notice that oh, many of our circulatory stimulants or remedies that are used to break a fever, right, have a very pungent, spicy flavor to them. Things like cayenne pepper or angelica or garlic or ginger. We're looking at herbs that maybe have a bitter taste. Well, interestingly, a lot of those herbs are stimulating to digestion. Many of them are alterative detoxifying remedies. Many of them are cooling and drying in their energetics. Many of them have an affinity for the liver. So when you start to build your experiential understanding of herbs based on taste, it's this kind of, I like to think of taste as kind of the top of this cascade of a pattern within the plant that enables you to really understand it on a significantly deeper level. That was one of the biggest struggles that I had when I was first studying herbs at Bastyr University, right? And it was, kind of in that more conventional educational model where I had to memorize a whole bunch of information, and I really struggled with it. It was really, really difficult for me. And I actually didn't really think I kind of felt a little stupid at times because it was like in one ear, out the other. And it was just really overwhelming. There's a lot to learn. And it wasn't until I really started taking what I was learning intellectually and being like, well, how can I ground this into a practical experience? And it was really what really landed that for me was just putting the medicine where my mouth is, so to speak, right? Is actually taking the herbs as, oh, okay, it's one thing to, read, cayenne is a circulatory stimulant and can induce sweating, but it's a whole other thing to take a dropper full of really hot cayenne tincture and feel that heat in your stomach and feel it radiate out and feel your body get warmer and see your skin turn red and feel that moisture collecting on your skin as you start to break a sweat. You'll never forget that. The other day I did a really great interview with a dear friend of ours, herbalist Rosalie de la Forêt. And, she was saying something that really struck me, which is that as humans, we remember our experiences, right? That if you think about your life and your memories, it's usually not something that you memorized, right? It's something that you experience for yourself. And I think this is one of the most important ways that we can really rapidly develop and grow on our plant path is by directly experiencing those herbs, getting it out of the head and into the body, right? So that we have this really tangible, practical way of learning about our plants. Now, this aspect of taste is really one of the most ancient ways of classifying and understanding plants from a lot of different traditional perspectives. If you've ever dug into studying Chinese medicine or Ayurvedic medicine or even some of our Western herbal traditions, you'll see that the taste is a critically important aspect for the way that they actually classify the medicinal virtues of a plant. And so by anchoring and developing your senses, right, your sensory experience of a plant, this makes studying those traditional models way more grounded, way more practical, and just much more real. It brings it to life. One of the other really cool things about kind of refining your sense of taste is that it actually enables you to decipher the medicinal properties of a plant that maybe you don't even know anything about. I remember one time when I was traveling through the Amazon and I was on an herb walk with an herbalist and local healer, and he was showing me a bunch of the different medicinal plants in the area. And obviously I didn't know any of these herbs because I'm not too familiar with Amazonian materia medica, right? But he picked this plant and said, this is a really valuable medicine that we use, go ahead and taste it. And so I popped it in my mouth, and it had this really kind of diffusive, almost like echinacea tingling, diffusive effect. It was very warming and aromatic and pungent. And And I remember asking him, I said, "Oh, do you use this herb, to move the blood? Do you use it for heart conditions, or do you use it to treat fever, bruises, things like that?" And I remember he kind of had this was like, "Whoa, like, how'd you know that?" He was like, "Yeah, that is how we use it." And, it was like, well, it was just because of understanding that taste, I was able to draw conclusions about the energetics of the herb, the organ affinities of the herb, the medicinal actions of the herb, and from that, draw conclusions on what types of conditions or ailments or diseases that plant might treat. So this is a really amazing tool that allows you to start to decipher the medicinal properties of a plant that you might not even be familiar with. And that is a really, really valuable tool. And so another way that you can work with this is, understanding different species of plants in the same genus. So, when we're studying our materia medica, we generally have, standard species of plants that we work with, right? We think of yellow dock, we typically work with Rumex crispus, but there's a lot of different species of yellow dock out there. But if we know that the main yellow dock that we use has a very bitter flavor to it, if we're, come into contact with a different species of yellow dock, well, we can dig up that root, chew on that root, and if it has a similar flavor profile to Rumex crispus, we can imagine that those are going to be interchangeable species. And so this is a way that you can start to understand, and this is a question I get a lot, is like, oh, well, is this is a different species of this plant, but is it going to work similarly? Well, this is a way that you can determine that for yourself simply by tasting it and kind of correlating that to the standard species that is used. Another really amazing way that you can work with taste is really assessing quality of medicine. If you've experienced the bitterness of chewing on an Oregon grapefruit, you go out and you dig a fresh Oregon grapefruit, chew on it, and you're like, whoa, you taste how bitter that is. And then maybe, someone has some dried Oregon grapefruit that they want to make into a tea. Well, maybe you make that tea and drink it, and it doesn't really taste that bitter. Well, then that maybe that's a really old plant material. Maybe it's degraded over time. So this is a way that you can assess, whether the quality of a medicine, and that can be, a dried herb prepared into a tea. That could be perhaps a tincture. If you have an Oregon grape tincture and you take it and it doesn't taste very bitter, well, we can assume that, maybe the starting plant material wasn't of good quality. Perhaps the percentage of alcohol used to prepare that tincture wasn't really optimal for extracting the medicinal properties of that plant. So by refining your sense of taste, you can really assess the quality of medicine with a lot more precision. And, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to go, send it to a lab and get, high pressure liquid chromatography done on it, or, gas chromatography done on it to see how many constituents are in there. You can just taste it and see, is the quality there? And, the other aspect of this dynamic of tasting herbs as what I see as being the best way to study plants is that it's fun, right? I mean, let's face it, studying huge lists of herbs isn't the most exciting way to go about studying medicinal plants. It's important, but I think that has to be balanced with this experiential way of learning and making it fun, right? And there's a lot of ways that you can do that. You can kind of experiment with things, right? Maybe you've got a couple different bitter plants. Maybe you want to study your bitters. You want to study your bitter taste. Well, you can maybe take Oregon grape root every day for a week, and then you can take dandelion root every day for a week and compare them, right? Well, how are they similar? How are they different? How did they make you feel? What other things did you notice were going on when you were working with those plants? So you could kind of set up these little experiments, right? Or maybe even drinking Oregon grape tea for a week and then taking the tincture for a week. What are the differences there? What differences in the flavor did you notice? What differences in the effect did you notice? And this is really how we build this experiential body of knowledge that I think is what makes, what differentiates a pretty good herbalist from an excellent herbalist, because you have this whole library of understanding within you that, because it's an experience, you'll never forget. So how do you work with this? Well, I guess I kind of mentioned it. I think one of the best ways to start really integrating this into your herbal studies is to just pick one herb a week and taste it every day. And, I think it's good to give it a little time, in the sense of you're not just like rushing out the door and, oh, quick, take your herb and keep going. It's like, I think it's good to maybe take 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and really sit with your cup of tea or sit with that tincture and take it into your body and make note of, how do you feel? You feel a little warmer, you feel a little cooler, does your mouth get really dry, do your skin start to sweat, do you feel hungry, do you feel tired, do you feel alert and awake? Like, how is that plant affecting you on a physiological level? Maybe even on a psychological level? Like, what are the different ways that you notice that plant influencing your body, right? And this can be, I always encourage people to take the herbs individually, all by themselves, right? So that way you're really just getting to know that individual plant. But as you do this over time, you can start, making recipes or making formulas, integrating it into your food and into your diet and into, just your daily life. And I think that's the thing, right? Is that the more that you can infuse herbal medicine into your lifestyle, into your daily life, that's a really incredible way to build that understanding. And then sharing with others, right? It's like we have our own experience of the plants, but we can also learn through other people's experience. And I think one of the greatest ways to do this, and we've had a lot of students in the evolutionary herbalism community do this, is starting kind of like an herbal tasting circle in their local community, right? Maybe making a meetup group, or, just connecting with friends or reaching out to other people in the herbal community and, doing the herb a week thing, right? Where everyone's working with that herb that week and they all get together and drink tea of that herb and talk about it and share their experience. Because it's really, the more people's experience that you hear of that plant, the more you're going to understand how it influences different constitutions, people with different tissue states, people with different body types and things like that. And that's really, really valuable from a clinical perspective, because that's going to enable you to have a better sense of how that herb might impact one of your clients' constitutions and whether it's really the right remedy for them or not. So that's a really, really fun way to, build community. It's a really fun way to deepen your understanding of plants, connect with other people, and learn from each other's experiences. And I think that is really what creating a learning community is all about, and it's just, the rising tide lifts all boats, so to speak. And I think that's a really great way to incorporate this dynamic of experiential understanding with your intellectual knowledge. So that is what I see as one of the best ways to study medicinal plants and really becoming almost like an herbal sommelier. If you think of people, sommeliers, right, that really understand wine, they have this ability to describe in incredible detail the flavor profiles of different wines. And, myself, I used to work in the coffee industry, and, you have these people that are really into coffee, and they can really decipher all of the different nuances and notes and just the whole flavor profile of coffee. And that's what I want for you, right? I want you to become an herbal sommelier, right? That you can taste a plant and with precision and detail really come to understand all the layers and depths of the flavor of a plant, and on a deeper level, be able to take that understanding of the taste and translate it into understanding its medicinal properties. So thanks so much for joining me here in this most recent issue here of the Evolutionary Herbalism blog. If you're not watching this on our website, be sure to head on over to evolutionaryherbalism.com, where we got a whole bunch of resources and free teachings there for you. Be sure to subscribe to us on our YouTube channel and our podcast, The Plant Path, and Facebook and Instagram and all that good stuff. So thank you so much for joining me here. And until next time, take care and be well.